All right, it is today's pre-show. Our pre-show on today's Network Plus study group. I need to turn up my headphones a bit. I don't think they are where I want them to be. There's always adjustments we need to make in the pre-show. That's why we have a pre-show. We get started at the top of the hour with our Network Plus study group. Thanks for joining us. I guess I could put the lower third up. There we go. So we also have, as you can see over my shoulder here, a map of the world, and you can digitally add your virtual pincushion right into that map of the world using that link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, which also is the link we will use for the rest of the study group to answer questions or to submit questions. So how convenient is that? That's intentional. Oh, it's been a good week. You know, we were supposed to originally do this on Wednesday, and then as things tend to be in my schedule, sometimes things get moved around a bit. So we moved them around a bit. So here we are on Friday the 13th doing a live stream, which is kind of fun. Kind of fun to do one on a Friday every once in a while. In the week off with is it a bang or a whimper? Well, we will find out. We will determine which one of that it is. We got about 8 minutes until we get started. I am currently checking cameras. You can kind of see all of the things that I see when I'm doing one of these. So our cameras look pretty good right now. They look pretty good. I like that. I see everything that is popping up. I've got things working the way they should be, or we got things I can click here. Things are working. Hey, there I am. Hi, everybody. I'm off to the side right now. It's all working. It's all alive. So we're fine with that. We are recording down here. You can't really see the Cylons running there when I've got this up. So both of those are working. Of course, we're recording on the YouTube as well. Am I planning to do any training for CompTIA AI security? Not really planning any right now. No, we are not. We're not really sold on a non-certification type course at the moment, but who knows? We might get there someday. Maybe that certification takes off and everybody wants it. Well, then I will be running after you, trying to get a certification, or really it's not really a certification course, is it? Is AI security a cert? I don't know that it is. This is how much I've really spent looking at it for that. What do you mean no captioning? Well, we're live, so no, there's no captioning when we're live. YouTube is not that good yet. Maybe someday they'll be able to make that happen. But at the moment, no, we don't have any captioning on our live streams, unfortunately. The cost of that would just be phenomenal, just be amazing, just be a lot. So unfortunately, we're not able to do that. Oh, well. Okay, well, this is all Network Plus today. I have got all new questions for you. I wrote these questions over last weekend, so I've effectively forgotten all of it. So it will be a new study group for me as well. We'll see. I did go through the questions this morning just to make sure I had all the questions in the right place. They were in order. This is what I try to do every time. But as many of you who have watched before know, that is not exactly what happens every time. You know that is not always what is going on. So that is where we are right now. So we've got at least an hour's worth of Q&A. But I've also got questions that I will answer from you. So if you have questions, you can always submit those using that same link. There's a link at the top of your screen where you could either submit a question or answer a question. So as we are going through this live stream, if a question comes up, you have something you want an answer on, in our after show, which is the second hour of the live stream, we go through those questions. So we can make that happen as well. Things here are looking good with screens and cameras, and the internet is working. Thank you, internet. We sacrificed a mouse earlier, like this was one that was one of the older ones. I found a bunch of old equipment, and I just got a bunch of stuff together. And I said, we will sacrifice this to the internet gods, and it seems to be working so far. So we'll see how it goes. We will see how it goes. 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. Make it happen. Everything else seems to be working okay. It's a beautiful day here in Central Florida, which is where our headquarters is. It's where the studio is. It's where I am. It's funny how all that works. But here we are. We will be working through your these new questions here in the first part of it, and maybe we'll have some good questions in the after show. That part's really up to you. I don't plan the after show. I don't. I do no planning or work at all for the after show, and it shows because I have no extra content for you usually. There's lots of good Network Plus content to talk about, certainly. Things that are happening, what's happening with, time frames. We will talk about that in the very beginning of this, but it's going to be a good year for getting knowledgeable with the network. It's always a good time to get more knowledgeable of networking because it applies basically across the board in IT. So if you're someone who is thinking of networking, is networking something you need to know about? Do I need to know about the switching routing thing? What is this OSI model? How does the security piece fit into it? This is exactly where you need to be. Those are the skills you need across the board in IT. And if you're ever planning to get into security, which it seems like a lot of people are, well, then you'll need a lot of networking knowledge. IT security is maybe more than half of that is a solid expertise in networking. So that's a very good example of where you need to be with this. All right, phone goes over here. Did I turn off the phone? Did I turn it off? I did not. Okay. Ring is on. Now the ringer is down. Now the ringer is off. Okay. We are good. How to change your career into networking. Learn as much as you can about operating systems, and then learn as much as you can about the networks that run over and use those operating systems. That is my recommendation. I think operating systems is a good place to start because you begin to understand what is this network connecting. Otherwise, you're sort of learning about switching and routing. You have no idea to be able to do that. Why is there no video on-demand scrub during the stream? Because it's a live stream. And I'd like, and since we're answering questions in real time, if I make it so that you're able to back up in real time, people will get onto the stream and they'll be at the wrong place and they'll be trying to answer the wrong question at the wrong time and not realize that they're working in the past and the rest of us are in the future. So that's why I intentionally turn off the backup in time to do that, because it just confuses folks. Not everybody, certainly, but there are some folks that hop in there and they hit the wrong button, or they don't realize they're in the past, or you're so used to pausing your YouTube and then you come back to your YouTube and then you hit play, not realizing you're 20 minutes behind now. I think that's really what generally happens. We sort of forget that it's live. There's a whole relative time frame associated with it. So that's why. That is why. So, but obviously once this is done, it is saved in the on demand. The instant this is finished and I hit stop, minutes later, it's available on YouTube. And of course, from there, you can scrub wherever you'd like. You can move back and forth and do that. But that's one of those features that is regrettably disabled during this live stream. And for the same reason that we don't do our live streams in 4K. You'll notice if you look at your cogwheel, if you're on a desktop, you can see that we're in 1080p. And we do that because this is live and real time, and you're seeing this about 7 to 8 seconds after I am saying it, which is really fast. But if I put it at 4K, that extends out to about 20 seconds. It's 4 times as much content. It takes more power to re-render all of that information on the YouTube side. So that's why. That's the deal. All right, we have a lot going on here. I am, although I record everything in 4K right here on my side, you just never get to see it. Sadly, you never get to see that part. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour. That would mean that we are sort of going to do a live stream. What do you think? I think we are going to do a live stream, so we can make that happen. Got a lot to work through. It is the top of the hour. I want to see it move to 12, just so we have, look at that. Beautiful. Let's bring up our keynote. Thank you, keynote. Let's bring up our play button. Green is good. Excellent. I like it. I think we can do a live stream now, don't you? I think so too. Let's get rid of a lower third. Let's bring up a title bar and let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2026 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you are following along online if you are here live, and you can answer the questions as you are following along if you are indeed here live. And a number of people are here live right now. Thank you for joining us on this live stream, a rare Friday live stream, which for those of you watching the replay means nothing. But for those of us that are here, it is not always common to do a live stream on a Friday. So today it is Friday the 13th. So this is the scariest thing that will happen today, is you having to answer Network Plus questions. I hope it is anyway. If that's the case, we're all doing pretty well. We're able to do this live stream thanks to your support. And if you would like to join us and answer these questions, you simply go to professormesser.com/QA and you submit those questions to the live stream view. In fact, I'll put up a question right now for you. And this is what we call one of our rewind questions, because this is a question we did in a previous study group. This will be the only time that you will see a previous question on the study group, because obviously we create brand new questions for each live stream. So let's have a look at today's rewind question. It is a question that asks, an internal DNS server has resolved the FQDN of vpn.professormesser.com to 10.10.117. I have too many. In fact, I did exactly the same thing I did last month and left the numbers in here. 10.117.23.44. Just take it as that. Read it in one place, it says one thing. Read it in one place, it says something different. You'll know what to do. What DNS record was used to provide this resolution? Now, as always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to answer your question by visiting that link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Your possible answers are, what DNS record was used to provide this resolution? Is it MX, NS, A, SOA, or CNAME? Yes, I know. I have a Hollywood IP address there. That's what I like to call an IP address that makes no sense. It's completely ridiculous. That's one from a movie. Certainly. That's where they always mess up the IP addresses. So if you know this answer, follow this link, professormesser.com/QA. Answer that link, and we will come back to this question in just a bit. Thanks so much for joining us. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. This month, we are doing this study group with all new questions, of course, as we do with every study group. And we have both multiple choice and performance-based questions that we will go through today. We also have the ability for you to ask questions of me. You can do that at any time by following that same link, professormesser.com/QA. There it is. You can put that in. You can not only answer questions there, you can ask questions there, and we'll take your questions in the second hour, so stick around for that. Don't forget that we are on your favorite social media sites. Our entire Network Plus course is open and available for you to watch for free on our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. You can also find an index of all of those on our website at professormesser.com. Don't forget about Twitter and X. You go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X to get our weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. You also find those on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on other places around the internet. You simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on, or use the icons at the upper right of our website. Another great way to find us online. This certification that we'll talk about today is the Network Plus. If you see any writings of the Network Plus, you'll notice there's a version number associated with those. The current version number for the Network Plus is the N10-009. This is a version of the exam that was released on June the 20th of 2024, which means the estimated retirement date for this exam will be somewhere at the end of 2027. That means as we sit here in 2026, you have plenty of time to get through this exam and take it with the current set of exam objectives. Just make sure all of your study materials are clearly marked with N10-009 and you have all of the correct study materials. They often will change things between versions. So there's a lot of things dropped from this version. There were a lot of things added to this version. That's why it's so important that you have the right version of study materials. The exam itself is a single exam. You have 90 minutes to complete the exam. You will get a maximum of 90 questions, which means you will probably get fewer, just under 90 questions. They don't often give you a full 90, but they could, so be ready for that. The score that you're shooting for is on a scale from 100 to 900, and the total score that is a passing score is a 720 or higher. I guess 720 to 900 is our sweet spot. That's where we want to be at the end of the exam. The exam itself consists of multiple choice questions, very similar to the one we are currently working on. It also contains what CompTIA calls performance-based questions, and we'll talk about those in just a moment because, of course, I have a new performance-based question for you on today's study group. Also let you know that we have a lot more study materials on our website. If you're interested in our course notes, our success bundle, there's a lot of other study materials that can help you get through your Network Plus exam. You can find that on our website, professormesser.com/netsuccess. This has a lot of good information that might help you as you are studying for Network Plus, something that might appeal, especially if you're someone who's watching these videos and you need additional study materials to get you into the mode of being ready for this exam. We also have a lot of information that you are able to get after this live stream is over, because we make not only the video replay available on YouTube, I also create an audio-only replay, which is perfect if you're in the car, you're traveling on a train, you're working out somewhere, and you really don't have time to watch a screen. You can, of course, get the audio-only podcast distributed version at professormesser.com/podcast. So you can add that to your favorite podcast listening program. We also have our podcast available on a lot of streaming services. So if you're on Spotify, for example, simply type in Professor Messer, and you'll find all of our live stream audio podcasts available there as well. And about a day after we're done here, you'll notice that timestamps will almost magically be available in our YouTube video description. It's not magic, really. It just seems that way, thanks to the magical efforts of Lori, my marketing manager, who's listening to this right now, going through all of this and parsing out and putting those timestamps in. So if this is something that you like, she's probably watching this on the replay at 2x speed and watching the replay of the text in the chat as well. So make sure you give Lori a heart in the chat if you're someone who likes to use those timestamps. I know they're very useful for hunting down exactly what you are looking for after the fact. Might save you some time. Also let you know that we have a Discord server that you're welcome to join as well. This is where I and many of us hang out when we're not doing our live streams. You can find thousands of people that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, Security Plus, and other certifications out there. Simply join us at professormesser.com/discord, or you can join us by clicking the links at the top of the Professor Messer website. This is another great way to stay up to date, to study with others. You can interactively start your own study room. Other people will magically join, and you can all work together to figure out the details of the Network Plus exam. A lot of really nice people on there. It's a really great group of folks. So we're very happy and very proud of that community that has been created, that really I just built sort of the structure. It's really your hard work that has made it such a nice place to visit and have people find what they need to earn the information or learn the information they need for their certification exam. So another thing to think about over at professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take your certification exam, and there is a cost associated with that, but we can help with that because we have exactly the same vouchers that are on the CompTIA website available on professormesser.com, but they're discounted. So you don't have to pay as much as the CompTIA website if you happen to be in the US or Canada. Sorry for the folks that are outside of US, Canada, or US territory. You'll have to find your vouchers either on the CompTIA website or with a partner that is in that particular geography. So not only do you get a discounted voucher, which is kind of nice, you also get something that you can't get over on the CompTIA website, which is my CompTIA Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote of some tips and tricks that I use during the study process and strategies you can use during the exam itself to perhaps get you a few extra points. So this is always a best practice idea, and we try to put all of those best practices into that practice exams book. I think I've taken maybe 25 or 30 different industry certification exams through the years. I've tried to take everything I've learned with all of those and put them into a single book. So another idea of getting the last bit of information. So not only do you know all the networking content, you also know a little bit about, it's not really hacking the exam, but using a good strategy for approaching the exam that can give you the best possible score once you hit the end. Let's talk about that question that I asked earlier. The question asked, An internal DNS server has resolved the FQDN of vpn.professormesser.com to 10.117.23.44. What DNS record was used to provide this resolution? Was it MX, NS, A, SOA, or CNAME? We're going to close the poll to see how you did with this one. And I can say you did a little bit better than we did last week. I think that's where I pulled this one from. 58% of you say that is the A record. A CNAME record got 21% of the vote. 13% of you said it's the NS record. 7% said MX. 1% said SOA. So 58% is a pretty good number, and indeed, that is the number we were looking for. The answer here is the A record. The A, of course, stands for address. This is where we would put in that link that is between a fully qualified domain name. That's what the FQDN is in that question. The fully qualified domain name is that word we type out to hit a website, www.professormesser.com. Of course, when you type that into your browser has no idea where my website happens to be in the world. All it knows is you typed in professormesser.com. So it has to somehow find the IP address of my web server wherever it happens to exist in the world. And it's able to do that because somewhere there is a DNS server that has that information. And that DNS server is one that works extremely well to be able to help us figure out what those IP addresses are. So we don't have to remember the IP address of the Professor Messer website. And I'm happy for that because sometimes I will move the website to a different IP address, maybe even a different hosting service, but it doesn't matter to you because I've already changed the DNS settings. So that is why that address record is the best way to resolve it. That's what an address record literally looks like. It has the name www.professormesser.com, and it resolves it to the IP address associated with professormesser.com. So that is why the large number of you, 58% of you, said it is the A record that does that. Now, 21% of you said it's the canonical name record. The canonical name record is used to take a name of a server and use an alias of that name to refer to the same server. So I could have a www.professormesser.com that has an A record, but maybe that server also provides me with file transfer protocol capabilities. It's an FTP server. That could also be ftp.professormesser.com, but we don't create a separate A record for that. We already have an A record. We simply create a CNAME record, and CNAME records refer to a different name, not a different IP address, which is why a CNAME record would not resolve a fully qualified domain name to an IP address because a CNAME record has no idea what the IP address happens to be. We have 13% that said it's the name server record. That's the NS record. The name server record is one that has the ability to tell us where our name server happens to be. So that when you're looking for www.professormesser.com, you know who to ask. That's really what that NS record is designed to do. 7% of you said it's the MX record. That's the mail exchange record. That would help us know where to send mail if you want to send me an email message, but it doesn't do any type of resolution between a fully qualified domain name and an IP address. And only one of you said it's the start of authority record. That's the top record in a DNS configuration file. It has no IP address information in there about these fully qualified domain names, so that one would not be the answer that we were looking for either. The one that is clearly the answer that we needed and the one that could help you when it comes to understanding what these DNS records do is the A record, and 58% of you got that one absolutely right. There are a lot of other DNS records that you need to know about for the Network Plus exam. And of course, we have documented every single one of those. We will show you what they look like. We'll show you what they look like in the configuration file. We'll show you what they look like when you're configuring them in a web-based front end. You can find all of that in our N10-009 section 3.4 in a video called DNS Records, of course. Well, hopefully that's gotten you now into our question and answer process. Now it's time to take the stakes up a bit because I have all new questions from this point forward. And as many of you know, our first new question of the study group, I like to do a performance-based question. Performance-based questions have an odd name. There are two different kinds of questions you will get on your exam. You will get a multiple choice question, like the one we just did, where there was a question, and there were multiple answers to choose from. Even if you didn't know that this one was the A record, you could have guessed. And with 5 different options on this screen, that means that you had a 20% chance of getting the question right, even if you didn't know it. Well, CompTIA doesn't want to give you quite that much of an advantage, so they've created a series of questions, a handful of questions at the very beginning of your exam that are not multiple choice questions. That effectively is the way that we approach the idea of a performance-based question. It's just anything but multiple choice. So keep in mind that they could structure this as a fill in the blank, a drag and drop. They could have you perform something at a command line. Anything that you can think of can be a performance-based question. So I try to give you some examples of what some of these might be as we go through it. But as I always like to say, as long as you know the exam objectives, really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You're going to know the answer just fine. And I think you'll know the answers just fine to these as well. I have for you today a performance-based question that is all about OSI. And I would like you to associate an OSI layer to each of these descriptions. And I have for you a number of descriptions that are on the page. These are written in a way that is kind of a broad description of what's going on. I need you to figure out what OSI layers associated with this. And I'm not telling you what the OSI layers are. There's no drag and drop here. I'm hoping that you remember what OSI layers are, what the different layers are associated with, maybe what their name happens to be, but I'll take a number in this configuration as well so that you know what it happens to be in this case. So we have 6 different descriptions here. The first one is each time a user logs into their account on a SaaS provider, the images are pixelated. What OSI layer is associated with this particular description? The next one is a user is moved to a different desk and an RJ45 connector has been accidentally pulled off of the Ethernet cable. That's another one to consider, what OSI layer is associated with that. And of course, if you know the answers to these, the correct place to answer these would be the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Please don't put any answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We will go from there as well. We have a third on our list is a database server has inadvertently been assigned the same static IP address as an active web server. Well, that doesn't sound good. But what OSI layer is associated with that? Fourth one on our list is a change control request includes a new firewall rule to block all remote desktop UDP and TCP ports. So somebody's really cutting back. Certainly we're adding firewall rule, but what does that mean in the world of OSI? And we have next to last is the MAC address of a cable modem must be administratively assigned to match the ISP configuration. Just another one of those tasks that you have to do as a network administrator, but what OSI layer is associated with that? And lastly, a web server administrator has changed the listening port from 80 to 8080. There's got to be an OSI layer associated with that as well. What is it? If you think you know the answer to these, you can submit them at any time by going to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. We're getting a number of answers that are coming in right now. Remember what you put in for each of these. When you submit your answer, at least it used to hide these from you. Maybe it still does. So keep in mind what you put as the right answer after you submit them. I think that's harder than answering the question to begin with. I don't only have to answer it, but I have to remember it. Yes, we have a very difficult live stream when we're doing a performance-based question, because I don't mix up, or I don't list the different answers that are in here, because I didn't want to prompt you with what these were. I wanted to see if you really knew what an OSI layer was, what the possible OSI layers would be, and I just want a number as the answers to these, but I'll take the actual OSI layer name as well. That's acceptable. We can work through the details of that to know what it happens to be. So submit your answer. Find that link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you can plug that answer into our view that is on the back end of this. So we're not going to be able to compile the answers from this because it is a text-based fill-in type scenario. But I can see the questions and the answers as they come in. I'm not going to look quite yet to be able to see those. Let's step through each one of these and see if my interpretation of the OSI layer matches your interpretation of the OSI layer. So we'll start at the very top. Each time a user logs into their account on a SaaS provider, the images are pixelated. That's something that's annoying. But if we're trying to describe where we believe this problem exists, then we need to describe this. This is more of an application problem. It has nothing to do with port numbers. It has nothing to do with MAC addresses. It has nothing to do with an Ethernet cable or a fiber connection. This is something related to the application itself. And you got a little hint of that when we refer to a SaaS provider. That's a software as a service provider, and they are providing you with an application. So the application layer of the OSI model is layer 7. So our first option there is layer 7. Each time a user is logging into their account on a SaaS provider, those pixelated images are an application problem that are happening at OSI layer 7. Next on the list, we have another one there. This one asks, a user has moved to a different desk and an RJ45 connector has been accidentally pulled off the Ethernet cable. Or maybe it was intentionally pulled off the Ethernet cable. Either way, we have a physical problem, a physical layer issue, because we're not able to get the signal from the network into the network interface card because we have lost the RJ45 connector associated with that. That indeed is a physical layer problem, or layer 1. That is the one that you would need to know that has anything to do with something physically connected to this. So anything dealing with signal, being able to get signal from one device to another to get that signal across the network is generally a layer 1 issue. Next question is, a database server has inadvertently been assigned the same static IP address as an active web server. I put in originally that it had just been assigned the same static IP address as an active web server, but I didn't want you to think that was normal. I think most of us know that multiple IP devices with the same IP address are a bad thing. And whenever you have an IP address, whenever you see IP addresses, subnet masks, routing, default gateways, anything dealing with an IP address, that is a layer 3 issue. That's a network layer issue. So that is a layer of the OSI model that is really focused on layer 3 protocols. And by the most part, pretty much the only layer 3 protocol we see on most networks is IP. But of course, there are other layer 3 protocols out there, just some that we commonly don't use any longer. Layer 3, though, is definitely describing a static IP address problem. An IP address issue in general is indeed a layer 3 issue. So anytime you see an IP address, that's layer 3. You can lock that in immediately. Next on our list is a change control request. Includes a new firewall rule to block all remote desktop UDP and TCP ports. Someone is apparently allowing TCP and UDP remote desktop through their firewall, which probably is not what they would want. So yes, you probably do want to control that. But what OSI layer is it associated with is our transport layer, layer 4. So anytime we are working through anything dealing with a UDP port number or a TCP port number or just port numbers in general, anytime you see a port number issue, that is a layer 4 issue. You can associate that with that layer 4 problem. The next on our list is the MAC address of a cable modem must be administratively assigned to match the ISP configuration. This also is a very common thing you'll run into with some older ISPs where you're using your own modem and they really want to lock in the physical cable modem to that particular connection. And so they want it to be a particular MAC address. Well, of course, MAC addresses are burned into these devices when they're manufactured, but many of these devices also allow you to administratively assign a MAC address. You can make it anything you would like. So administratively having a MAC address, we're talking, and of course, anytime you see a MAC address in a question like this, we're referring to the MAC layer, the DLC layer, the data link control layer of the OSI model. And layer 2 is what we would use there. The MAC address of a cable modem must be administratively assigned to match the ISP. We're dealing with MAC addresses. We're dealing with layer 2. And lastly, a web server administrator has changed the listening port from port 80 to port 8080. Well, that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Web server administrators changing the listening port would be changing the IP address. Nope. The MAC address. Nope. The application itself, nope, but they are changing port numbers. And again, I told you, anytime you see a port number, we're dealing with that transport layer. We're dealing with layer 4 of the OSI model. So make sure that you know that anytime a port number pops up, we're definitely doing that. We're absolutely working through these. So those are the layers, and the OSI layers and the descriptions that we would associate with those. A user logging into their account on a SaaS provider getting pixelated images is having an application layer problem at layer 7. A user moving to a different desk and ripping off that connector of the Ethernet cable, that is a physical layer problem at layer 1. A network layer problem will be one where a database server has inadvertently been assigned the same static IP address, and so we're dealing with IP address problems at OSI layer 3. We have a change control request with new firewall rules to block all the remote desktop TCP and UDP ports. That's absolutely at layer 4 because anything port related is at layer 4. MAC addresses of a cable modem must be administratively assigned to match the ISP configuration. We're changing the data link control address, DLC. The MAC address is a data link control address, and that is indeed layer 2. And lastly, we're changing port numbers. And if our port number, we're changing from 80 to 8080, that is a layer 4 issue in our OSI models. So those are the things that we need to keep in mind. Make sure you are familiar with all of those different layers of the OSI model. We have an entire video that talks about the OSI model, so that might be a good thing to think about. There were a few questions that came in while we were doing this. One is, do companies still use the OSI model layers in troubleshooting? I don't know what still means. We constantly use OSI. That's why we describe the OSI layer in the Network Plus exam objectives. It's an incredibly popular way to communicate with people that may even be outside of your organization, and you can describe a problem and immediately everybody will understand what we're talking about. You can tell someone, I think we're having a layer 4 problem associated with this connection to your server because here's a port number here, here's a port number here, and you can work through the diagnostics associated with that. We use it constantly and use it to be able to communicate back and forth so that everybody understands what we're thinking when we're going through the troubleshooting process. You don't call someone up and say, with a port number problem and say, we're having a layer 1 issue, because layer 1 means the physical network connection is not working properly. So that is a really good example of where you would go through and understand and use OSI in your normal day. It's a very common way, and it's a good way to remember how to communicate with other people when you're talking about network level issues or network level configurations. The other question we got, it's a very popular question, is do we get partial credit for this? If this was an actual exam and we got maybe 5 of these correct and we missed 1, do we get partial credit? Well, there is a frequently asked questions file on the CompTIA website where they have definitively told us that there are times when they might give you partial credit. There you go. They effectively said, yeah, we could. Oh, we could not. We aren't going to tell you when we do. You'll never be able to figure out if we do or not. But there are times when we do apply partial credit. I would think a case like this, if I go in with glass half full, that this would be one of those scenarios where you would get partial credit. So you can't rely on it. And of course, you'll never be able to determine if you got partial credit or not. So it's a kind of the idea of trying to understand the grading system is an effort you should not go through, because you'll never get an answer. You'll never know. You'll never be able to reverse engineer it. You'll ultimately never in your lifetime ever get an answer to this question. It's a mystery of the universe that we will just have to go through our life never knowing how they really graded the exam. But they say they can, which I think is encouraging. So they don't just say, nope, you don't. I think if it is a question that tends to lend itself towards partial credit, I think they give it to us. Well, enough of partial credit, enough of performance-based questions. I think you guys did pretty well with that one. Let's now go back to a multiple choice question. This is a question that is asking about fiber networks. This question asks, a technician would like to test a fiber optic line for faults. Which of the following would provide this diagnostic information? Would it be tone generator, port mirror, Wi-Fi analyzer, visual fault locator, or inductive probe? Got a number of tools to pull from. All of these tools, of course, are part of the Network Plus exam objectives. We have to know what all of them are, but we're really only asking for one particular question in this case. The question again asks, A technician would like to test a fiber optic line for faults. Which of the following would provide this diagnostic information? Would it be tone generator, port mirror, Wi-Fi analyzer, visual fault locator, or inductive probe? If you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead answer our question online at the link that you see on your screen next to me. Is it over here? I always do the wrong way. Is it over here? It's over there. It's over there. Go over there. It's that link over there for those. This would be a good one to understand. Of course, there are many tools we can use whenever we're working through these exams and trying to understand how to use the tools, which case they would be used. That's really what CompTIA would like you to know. It's more than just knowing the tool exists. They want you to be able to know when to use these tools. You don't even necessarily need to know the details of what these tools are telling you, but you need to understand when would I use these. Ultimately, understanding the nuances of the output of these tools is another important part of your job. You will certainly be able to get through that. A lot of people have already answered this one. I'm dying to know. I've not looked at what you answered on this one, so we're going to find out right now. The question again asks, a technician would like to test a fiber optic line for faults. Which of the following would provide this diagnostic information? Would it be a tone generator, a port mirror, a Wi-Fi analyzer, a visual fault locator, or an inductive probe? What did you choose? Let's stop the poll and see how you did. 64% of you say it's a visual fault locator. 15% of you say it's an inductive probe. 13% of you say it's a tone generator. And now we go down to single digits. 6% said a port mirror. 3% say a Wi-Fi analyzer. So this is one where we do need to know a little bit about diagnostics. And indeed, this is a new topic that was added to the latest iteration of the Network Plus exam, the N10-009. Our answer that we were looking for is the one that 64% of you chose, the visual fault indicator. Now, what in the world is a visual fault indicator? It is simpler than the name implies. There's 3 words here that really should just be called flashlight. That's sort of what this is, this visual fault indicator. This is a picture of a visual fault indicator. It is effectively a flashlight that has a fiber optic connector on it. This one has it's like a BNC type connector. You also screw on connectors for this one. This is effectively shining a light down the fiber. That's how fiber optics work after all, is you need to be able to shine the light. We put a light on one end, we send that light to the other side, and somehow networking magic happens. There's a lot that goes on in there and working through it. So you have the biggest problem you have often when working with fiber, especially fiber that you've taken from a patch panel and you've moved it around and put it on a rack or you've plugged it into a device. Sometimes that fiber can be damaged. Inside, the fiber is relatively robust. You can really work with it pretty well, but if you bend it too much, it will break. It is fiber optics. It is glass on the inside of that effectively. So you can damage it in a way that will prevent the signal from optimally flowing through or maybe stopping the signal altogether. So one of the things you can do is you turn the lights out, you plug in your fiber, you turn the light on, and you can see through the outside of the fiber because the fiber is wrapped in a protective cover. But because you're shining a light through it, you can see where the light is coming through that outer protection. And that is where the break is. You don't want to see that light. So it's a very simple way of doing diagnostics. You are effectively just shining a flashlight down the fiber optic connection. But this is one that can really help you determine, is the break somewhere on the patch that I have here? I can simply throw that patch away and get a new one, or it may be somewhere else. We can follow the fiber all the way through the link and see where we happen to see the light shining outside of it. A very simple tool, but a very effective tool. And that's why our answer here would indeed be a visual fault indicator. Well done with that one. 13% of you said a tone generator. 15% said an inductive probe. We often refer to these as a toner probe. We just combine the name together to describe both of those. These are used on copper networks because they put an electrical signal, electrical tone on the wire, and you use an inductive probe to be able to find the other end of that very long wire to be able to have that to know where the end of it happens to be. So it's nice to have the tone generator putting the signal on, and the inductive probe finding the other end. So there are two different components, the toner probe. We demonstrate that in the video so you can get an idea of what a tone generator and an inductive probe are and how they work together. But they will only work on copper networks because we are sending an electrical signal across that copper. Obviously, we don't send electrical signals across a fiber optic. We send light. We send photons. So a tone generator and inductive probe not used on a fiber optic network. A port mirror, I think, could potentially answer this question, but not very easily, because port mirrors tend to filter out errors. They tend to only present you with good data. And that can be a little bit hard when you're troubleshooting, because you really would like a full view of everything that's going on there. So another one of those ideas where you need to be sure you're using the right troubleshooting task for the job at hand. Port mirror would not really be your best troubleshooting task in that case. And we're on a fiber optic line, which means Wi-Fi analyzers aren't going to help you very much at all, because we're not on a wireless network. We're on a fiber optic physical connected network. That is exactly where we can go for that. Maybe that can give you a feel for the different tools available. All of these tools, by the way, are part of the Network Plus exam objectives. So if you're looking through these and wondering, wait, what is port mirror again? Wait, what's a Wi-Fi analyzer and how does that compare to an inductive probe? You can go through that video and learn everything you need about it. That is from our video in section 5.5. The video name is Hardware Tools. Let's do another question. I have, since you loved port numbers earlier with the OSI question, I have a port number question for you on this one as well. This port number question asks, a firewall has been configured to block TCP 1433. Which of the following would be most likely to fail? Would it be secure browser access to the intranet server, incoming email transfers, internal phone calls and video conferencing, remote troubleshooting with screen sharing, or edits to the customer contact database? I think all of these things we do in a normal day. This is a real challenge, isn't it? The question again asks, a firewall has been configured to block TCP 1433. Which of the following would be most likely to fail? Would it be secure browser access to the intranet server, incoming email transfers, internal phone calls and video conferencing, remote troubleshooting with screen sharing, and edits to the customer contact database? If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You can answer your question at any time by going to that link that is on your screen. That is the best place to go to answer these questions. This is one of those also that if you're looking at port numbers, there are a lot of port numbers you need to know for your exam. Fortunately, it's not a huge number of port numbers. There is a minimal number of port numbers. So make sure you are familiar with those. They are all listed out one by one in the CompTIA exam objectives. And the only thing that I can really help you with from that perspective, from trying to memorize these, is that it's a limited number. It's a finite number, and CompTIA does not deviate from that list. So I've seen people with pages and pages of hundreds of port numbers they've been trying to memorize. Don't do that. None of us in the industry do that. We know those core 20, 25, 30 port numbers or so just because we work with them all the time in this industry. This is one of the very few things we really do have to memorize for the exam. It's kind of rote memorization. But not only do you need to know the port number, you need to know how it is used. And this is a very good example of testing you on that. So I'm testing you on more than just the port number. You might even know what the port number is referring to. But where does that fit into these different scenarios? Let's find out. Your question asked, a firewall has been configured to block TCP 1433. Which of the following would be most likely to fail? Would it be secure browser access to the intranet server, incoming email transfers, internal phone calls and video conferencing, remote troubleshooting with screen sharing, or edits to the customer contact database? We are going to stop our poll and see how you did with this port number question almost a little bit of a rainbow. We got close enough to a majority. 49% of you say the answer is edits to the customer contact database. And then we have almost a four-way tie for second place, interestingly enough. 14% said internal phone calls and video conferencing. 13% said incoming email transfers. 12% said secure browser access to the internet server. And 11% said remote troubleshooting with screen sharing. We were kind of struggling with this one. I know when we have all double digits on a question that we were kind of all over the place with this one. And indeed, port 1433, that's another one, I think, of a new port number that was added to Network Plus. Maybe it was also in the older N10-008 version. I'm not sure that it was or not. But whenever you see TCP port 1433, it is associated with a database. So databases are obviously an important part of the things that we do in practically every organization. In fact, that's really where the value is for a lot of companies. It's all of that data inside of their database. They might have databases for accounts payable, accounts receivable. They might have a database for their customer list. They might have a database for the information, the things that they're doing in planning and design. We use databases for a number of different things. And there are a number of different types of databases out there. Most of the databases you will run into are what we call here in the South squirrel databases. They are SQL databases. You might also refer to them as SQL. Kind of uncommon to refer to them as squirrel databases, however. I think we should, though. That's my plan. A structured query language. You'll hear it as SQL or you'll hear it as SQL. Both are reasonable and fine to describe. It's one of the things in this industry. We often will refer to things with a different pronunciation. Both are fine. Both are completely as valid as the other. And if you are looking at Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft's structured query language service uses TCP port 1433. So whenever you are working through the idea of databases, and one of the most common that you'll see out there is the Microsoft SQL Server. So that is a good place to go to whenever you see traffic on your network and it's port 1433 running over TCP, you can almost immediately refer to that as a Microsoft SQL Server communication. And then indeed is where most of you described it as well. 49% of you described it as edits to the customer contact database. The database itself is one that indeed has in it information associated that we're collecting and storing and needed to retrieve and update. That's all in a customer contact database, probably a Microsoft SQL Server database. That is exactly what we were looking for. That's why 49% of you were absolutely correct with that particular answer. 14% said internal phone calls and video conferencing. Those are commonly a number of different voice over IP protocols. There are different port numbers associated with this, although commonly you will see both TCP and UDP used for voice over IP for both signaling and sending the actual voice over IP communication, but neither of those uses port 1433 by default. Incoming email transfers, probably using SMTP. SMTP uses commonly port 25. There's some other port numbers it uses on the secure side, but does not use TCP 1433. Secure browser access. Well, that's our HTTPS inside of our browser, where you see the lock that is on your address bar. That's commonly using port 443. So not 1433. I guess the similar numbers when we were working through it, but there's only three there. Port 443 is HTTPS. And 11% say remote troubleshooting with screen sharing. That could be a number of different remote desktop configurations. 3389, for example, is the port number used by Microsoft Remote Desktop. Obviously, that is different than port 1433. Port 1433 is associated with Microsoft SQL Server. And if we're editing a customer contact database, that is a perfect example of how we might use a Microsoft SQL Server database. Well, that is a good number of you. 49% of you got that one right. You did extremely well on that one as well. As we've already seen, there are a number of different topics you need to know on your Network Plus exam. We've already talked about OSI. We've talked about some physical layer fiber optic communication. We've talked about port numbers and other things that are important. There's security on the exam, there's troubleshooting, and there's so much more. One of the challenges with this is it's a lot of information to remember. You don't have to go incredibly deep. The Network Plus exam is an industry entry-level exam, but there's a lot of things that we need to learn about, a lot of nomenclature, a lot of terms, and a lot of ways that we describe these technologies. That's sometimes the most important part of this. The course notes that we've created for our course come directly from our videos. We think that's an important part of this so that you are able to see exactly the information that we have in our videos, not just the table of contents to those, but as we step through the very first video that is in our course is video 1.1, Understanding the OSI Model. And here's all the text from that OSI model presentation. So you can learn about layer 1, the physical layer, layer 2, the data link layer, layer 3, the network layer. It's all in here. And of course, there are other important graphics that might be important, things that will help you understand and remember what is in this particular set of videos. So this is a way that you can take the content of the videos along with you wherever you happen to go. You're looking at the PDF version, our digital edition of this set of course notes on the screen here. But of course, we have a physical edition as well. Same information. In fact, I think I can find that page. Here we are, same page on my book that you see on the screen. But this is one that is in a printed format you can take along with you. You can choose during checkout whether you just want the digital version that you can then put on all of your digital devices. So that's wherever you go, you know you have your course notes with you. If you purchase the physical edition, you get the digital edition at no additional cost. So while you're waiting for this to be printed and shipped to you, you'll be able to download the digital edition immediately, start reading through it, and use that as a source for study. You can find out more about this on our website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. It's also a great way to support the things that we do here. Hopefully that's a win-win where you're getting some great study materials for your certification. You're also helping us create new videos for the next generation of technical people coming through to get their first job in IT or get a better job in IT. Let's do another question. Next one on our list is this one, and it asks, a wireless access point has automatically switched frequencies to avoid conflicts with nearby third-party wireless devices. Which of the following would have provided this capability? Would that have been 802.3, 802.11h, RFC 1918, 802.1q, 802.1x? There's a lot of abbreviations and a lot of standards and a lot of numbers that go along with these standards, but I tried to take every single one I could find from your exam objectives. And this is it. So fortunately, if you know these, you're good for the exam. You don't have to remember any of these others. Once you work in the industry for a while, you will remember these. They'll just become normal as you're communicating and talking about different things. But these are the ones you need to know. And of course, you are asked specifically about this one in the official exam objectives, which is why I highlighted it for this particular question. Make sure you're familiar with these. And of course, I didn't make up any of these. All of these answers that are on the screen come from the exam objectives. I try to do that with all of my questions. It doesn't always work out that way, but I try to, so that if you are looking at these, maybe you know the answer and you've already locked in your answer. You already know what it is. You're solid on what the answer is. 100% you know what it is. Make sure you go through the other answers as well, and you know what those are. Do you know what each one of the ones you did not choose happens to refer to? You have to know that as well. So this is almost like getting 5 different questions in one. You might know the right answer, but make sure you know why the wrong answers are wrong and what they're referring to, because on your exam, you might get a question about another topic that was a wrong answer here, but it's going to be the right answer on your exam. It's another one of those challenges with knowing everything that you will need to know from that big list of exam objectives. We'll look at those objectives in just a bit. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a wireless access point has automatically switched frequencies to avoid conflicts with nearby third-party wireless devices. Which of the following would have provided this capability? Would that be 802.3, 802.11h, RFC 1918, 802.1q, or 802.1x? And by the way, those are real letters. The abbreviations and the case of the letters is also important. I'm not simply putting an X in as a holding spot. It's really the letter X, just so you're aware of that. Let's see how you answered this one. We'll stop our poll and see what you came up with as the answer. we did pretty well on this one too. There's a majority of you that we think answered a question. We don't know if it's the right question yet, but at least one of them is a big 48% of the answer. 22% of you, though, the 48% chose 802.11h. 22% chose 802.1x. 15% said .1q. We have 10% that said RFC 1918, and 6% said 802.3. Now, I have to tell you what all of these are. Let's see how I do. Let's start with the right answer, though. 48% of you said the answer was 802.11h. Indeed, that is the answer that we were looking for. This was a relatively recent addition, the last number of years, because we have a lot of wireless devices out there. We also have other devices on the same frequencies that are not part of a wireless network. Wireless network frequencies were sort of added into the mix as a controlled type of frequency where other devices might have priority on that frequency. Not always, but that is a good example of where you might find that. What we found, of course, is that wireless access points that may have been set up on one frequency could be conflicting with other devices around it. Well, why are we responsible for that? Why doesn't the access point figure that out and move to a different frequency where there isn't that level of interference? Or maybe it decreases the amount of power that's being used so it doesn't overwhelm that other network that's out there. That's part of the standard of the 802.11h. We knew it was part of the wireless standard because it's 802.11. 802.11 is the IEEE committee number for wireless networking, this style of wireless networking. The H, the lowercase letter, designates that it is an addendum or an addition to an existing standard that's out there. They often will create these additional standards, they'll group them all together, and then they'll put them into a newer standard when that is released. This particular standard refers to something known as DFS, that's dynamic frequency selection, so that we can avoid any conflicts with the frequency. 802.11h also changes the power that it is sending, so it can change how much power it needs just to be able to communicate to you. Why would we need to do that? Why would we need to increase power if everybody's able to hear the signal just fine anyway? So this is an appropriate way to minimize conflict and minimize communication issues, not only for your network, but for other devices out there that might be using the same frequencies, whether it's an 802.11 network or whether it's something else. So that is the answer that we were looking for. 802.11h, 48% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. We have other answers that you gave. 802.1x is a type of network access control, or NAC. We often refer to this protocol, 802.1x, as network access control. It limits people's access to a network. They have to authenticate to even be able to communicate on the network. That's pretty good security, and you'll find that if you're on a corporate network and you're plugging into a conference room or you're connecting to the wireless network, you might be prompted for a username and a password. So 802.1x is that process of presenting you with authentication before you're ever allowed to send traffic across the network, which is a great security best practice. 15% of you said .1q. It's kind of an abbreviation we use in the industry. That is 802.1q. This .1q refers to trunking between switches. Trunking, of course, means that we can have a single link and we can send multiple VLANs, effectively tunneling multiple VLANs within that same trunked connection from one switch to another. This way you can have 100 VLANs on one switch, 100 VLANs on the other switch, and instead of connecting 100 connections between those switches, which is rather impractical, you put one single connection and you send 100 different VLANs across that particular connection. We refer to that as .1q. We often just call it trunking. Oh, did you set up a trunk on there? You may find in your switch configuration, it doesn't say trunk, it says 802.1q. So those two are interchangeable, just so you know that those are available. 10% of you said RFC 1918. That's a request for comments, which is a way that people are able to create proposed changes to standardization on the internet. And if we decide to choose that as the standard, we begin implementing that RFC as a standard. RFC 1918 is a standard that effectively is referring to private IP addresses on the inside of our network. RFC 1918 has nothing to do with frequencies, wireless networks, or anything associated with those. So anytime you're looking at your private IP address, it starts with 10 dot, the 192.168 networks that you're using, the 172.16s, 172.17s, and the like, those are private IP addresses, and the definition of what those addresses are documented in RFC 1918. A little fun reading for you after we're done here on the study group. And lastly, 6% of you said 802.13. 802.13 is the IEEE committee for Ethernet. Probably one of the largest IEEE committees. Obviously, Ethernet has been around for a very long time and continues to evolve. It continues to grow, and it's able to do that thanks to the hard work of the IEEE 802.3 committee. So in this case, if you're dealing with wireless, you're probably dealing with 802.11. And if you're looking for a change to that wireless network, you'll see a lowercase letter right after the end of that. That is referring to a change. So when we talk about the 802.11N, the 802.11 AC, the 802.11 AX, those are modifications to the original 802.11 standard, and that happens to be the one where we rolled everything up and we sent it out as a standard with that letter at the end, so we could designate that that is one of the latest changes to the standard. That is a lot of detail in there. And by the way, if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's a continuing education unit credit. Not everybody uses the CEUs to renew their certification, but if you are, I'd love to make this available to you. The way that you can earn the CEU is to follow these instructions. You must follow these instructions to earn the CEU. If you go outside of this particular set of instructions, you won't earn the CEU. So listen carefully. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. On that website is a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, it will bring up a form. Put in your email address, your name, put in the subject line of February 2026 Network Plus or something like that. You'll be able to see it there. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, automatically switched frequencies. Big words for our super secret code words of the month. Automatically switched frequencies is what we're working through there. So again, the information that you need to be able to earn that 1-hour CEU category email, you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. In the Contact Us form, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put February 2026 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, automatically switched frequencies. You can, of course, add other text to that message if you would like underneath that single line by itself. I like to read through all of those. Those are kind of fun to go through. So make sure you're familiar with those. And send those through. It takes me about a week to turn these around, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but be patient. I will send it to you. It will be a digitally signed email. So you know when you receive it, you can validate it with anything that is a PGP or GPG compatible verification. If you know what I'm talking about, that's great. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine too. Just know that you've now earned a 1-hour webinar category CEU. We have a little bit of time before the top of the hour, so let's squeeze in another question, shall we? I think we should. This next question is one that asks, a technician is physically connecting to a router configuration interface from the serial port on their laptop. Which of the following would best describe this poor grammar? No, this connectivity. I did leave a message out, a letter out of that, didn't I, as I went through it. A technician is physically connecting to a router configuration interface from the serial port on their laptop. Which of the following would best describe this connectivity? Is this out-of-band, SSH, jump box, GUI, or API integration? There's a lot going on there. See if you know the answer. If you think you do, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. I would often, as I traveled around the world with my firewall, showing my fancy, shiny firewall to prospective customers, I would often have to grab those, take them to the hotel room at night because I was usually traveling out of town, and I'd have to configure the firewall in the hotel room, which is something. You don't often have a lot of power options in a hotel room. There's not a lot of places to easily set up something to run in a hotel room, but we did it. And I would often physically connect to the firewall configuration interface from a serial port on my laptop. What was I doing? What was really happening there? So that's the question. This is something we do all the time, by the way, in the world of networking. There are also times where I do something a little different. So we'll talk what the answer happens to be. Didn't reveal anything. I just told you out exactly. In fact, I just repeated the question to you. I wanted to let you know this question was ripped from the headlines. This is something I do all the time when I would be working through that. And indeed, I still do these types of things to the equipment that we have here in the studio. There's a lot of stuff in here, and very often I have to physically connect to a configuration interface from the serial port on the laptop. So make sure you understand, what was I doing? How does that work? What's going on there? And perhaps even more importantly, what about these other things that are listed? Let's see how you did with this one. We are physically connecting to the router interface from a serial port on the laptop. Which the following describes this connectivity? Is it out of band, SSH, jump box, GUI, or API integration? I can't wait to see what you chose. We got to do big on this one, right? There's got to be like 100% of you said no. We again got a little bit of a rainbow. We have 46% of you say the answer is out of band. 25% say it's SSH. 14% say jump box. Now we have smaller numbers. We're down to single digits. 9% said GUI. 6% said API integration. This is one where I think we're going to go with the plurality of you that answered 46% of out of band. It is an out of band connection is what we were working with. That is exactly what we were working through. Well, what is an out of band configuration? Well, let's look at a switch, shall we? Here's an enterprise switch, rather old enterprise switch, but it works fine just the same. You can see a bunch of Ethernet interfaces here on the top. This is where we plug in our users and our servers and everything else. But we first need to configure this device. So we are physically in front of the device and we are configuring it. There is a place where you can plug in to the physical Ethernet network. This one happens to be a 10-100 1000 gigabit management port. This is where we would assign an IP address to this switch. We would it would allow us to connect to the switch remotely, either using a web browser for a web-based front end. We could connect to that yellow cable, that management interface, over an SSH connection to get a terminal screen. So the number of services that may be available in there to be able to work through. So that was not what we were describing, though. We were describing connecting to this device from a serial port on our device, on our laptop. Serial ports aren't communicating over an Ethernet connection. Serial ports are communicating over what is traditionally been called an RS-232 connection. And this would connect to a serial console connection on that device. Sometimes it's called serial. Sometimes this device is called console. Sometimes it is called out of band or OOB. That is what we're looking for. That is where we would plug in with a serial connection. So even if you didn't know the IP address that was configured on the switch for management, you didn't have the login for the management part on the switch, but you did have credentials that would allow you to plug into the serial connection, you could plug into the console port. The console port, it assumes, of course, that you are either physically in the room so that you can physically plug into the console port. This is usually the first port you plug into when you're configuring a device. There are also ways to set up a serial server so that you can connect to the serial server device and then from there jump to the console port. Because when the network is down, when your Ethernet connection is not available, you're going to need some way to get into this device. And the way that you do that is through this serial port, the console port, because practically 100% of the time, the console port will always be available to you. That's how you'll be working through it. If your console port is not working, you're in trouble. That is one that will create a problem for you. So out of band is what we're referring to when we're talking about that console port, because we're not in band. In band means we're using the standard Ethernet network. We're using TCP/IP. We're SSHing into the device, or we're connecting to it from a browser front end. We are in band. If we're outside the Ethernet network, we are out of band, connected to a console port somewhere that is on that device. That is the answer that we were looking for, out of band. It's a band. Out of band is what we were looking for because it is this serial interface that we were using to connect to it. If it was in-band, if we were connecting from the Ethernet port on our laptop, we would be in-band. We could also refer to that as more of a management port. That's often a very common nomenclature to use when we're talking about those interfaces on that device. The out-of-band configuration is what we were looking at here, but what about these other answers? SSH would be right if we were connecting to the Ethernet connection. Since we're connecting to serial, we're probably not using the SSH protocol inside of an Ethernet frame. That's because we're not connecting over Ethernet. We're connecting over a serial connection, so it would not be SSH. Would also not be a jump box. We didn't have a jump box in place. Jump boxes is a very basic name to call this because that's not the name of it. It is a service that is providing us with a proxy type connection into the network. But we refer to it as a jump box because it is a box on the edge of someone's network that we can connect to remotely. We can jump into this box from being outside the network. And once we are in this very secure box, we've authenticated to the box. We probably have multi-factor authentication. We are now inside the jump box. We can then from the jump box jump to other devices inside the network. So very commonly to see this when you're dealing with things like third parties that are managing your network, managed service providers. They need a jump box to be able to get access into your network, but it needs to be secure access. So we set up a very secure jump box to make that happen. Otherwise, they have to be in the building. We have a firewall. You can't get into these devices and configure them from the internet. You need some other type of secure view. And that jump box may have both in-band connections to these devices and out-of-band connections to these devices, but usually jump boxes are almost always in-band. Not always the case, but occasionally you will find jump boxes that can do both. 9% said a GUI, a graphical user interface. And although we often will use graphical user interfaces from a browser front end to configure a device, that's not what we were describing here. We were connecting with a serial port, which probably means we're not connecting into that graphical front end that commonly runs over an IP connection. And because we're plugging into a serial port, there is no IP connection on this particular link. An API integration, although extremely useful with our switches, routers, firewalls, and other devices, an application programming interface commonly communicates over the Ethernet network. We would not commonly, if ever, use an API integration from the serial interface on our laptop. So in this case, the best description of this connectivity is indeed out of band, and 46% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. We did pretty well with that one, I think. All of these questions that we did today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. This is a document you need to get if you are studying for your Network Plus exam. The Network Plus configuration and what we do with Network Plus has a lot of different topics. And those topics that are there are topics that could be many and varied. Here are the exam objectives right here. The objectives themselves not only describe kind of an overview of the exam and give you an overview of what the different domains are and the distribution of those domains that you would expect to find on the exam, they tell you exactly what you need to know for this test. In fact, they are so specific that they don't tend to go outside of this list. They lock you into this. They really don't need to go outside this list. There's plenty to learn, hundreds and hundreds of topics to learn. For example, Section 1.1 of the Network Plus exam objective says, explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, or OSI reference model. And they have layers 1 through 7, the physical, data link, network, transport, session, presentation, and application. And of course, we have a video that describes every single one of those because I used this list to create the videos. That's how you know that our Network Plus course, all of our courses, not just our Network Plus course, has every single topic you need to know to pass this exam. I think that if you go to a different training course, I've had people come back to me and say, they taught me a lot of other things. Well, that's probably because you were looking at an older course. They removed a lot from this exam and they added new things. You have to make sure you're always using the latest study materials because you will find there are things now that are not in this course that were in previous, and you'll find new things in this course that also did not show up in previous versions. So another thing to think about. Section 1.2, compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions, physical and virtual devices, routers, switches, firewalls, IDS, IPS, load balancers, proxies, NAS, SAN, access points, controllers, CDNs, VPNs, QoS, TTL. There's a bunch of abbreviations and a bunch of names you need to know right there, and we're only into section 1.2. If you can explain to yourself or to someone else what these topics are, then you're now ready to take this exam, as long as you can go through every single one of these. And I mentioned there's a finite number of port numbers. There they are. Those are the only port numbers you need to know for this exam. Are there other port numbers you will need to know in your lifetime of working on the network? Yes. But this is not a lifetime working on the network certification exam. This is the Network Plus certification exam. We have to have some type of guideline. We have to have a finite list that we can study from, and that is your finite list. This goes on for pages and pages and pages and pages, and you go through the whole thing. There's even an acronym list in the back. How handy is that? So you can go through all of that. That is all contained within the Network Plus exam objectives. These are free on the CompTIA website. What? It's a freebie. So make sure you grab these. It should be the first thing you read through before you start your studies. It should be the last thing you use as a checklist before you schedule the exam, just to see if you've really covered every topic that could possibly be used on the exam. Make sure you're familiar with those. That will be incredibly important as you go through the exam topics themselves. And it's incredibly important as you're studying for the exam. How do you know when you finally manage to learn everything about this exam? Unless you have a guideline, unless you have a list of objectives, you're not going to know. So make sure you're familiar with that. Find a copy of this and instructions on how you can get this list for free at professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups for Network Plus every month, and I have another one already planned for March the 11th. Of course, I have A+ study groups coming on March the 3rd and the 5th. March the 11th is our Network Plus study group. March 18th is our Security Plus study group. We're kind of jumping ahead. We're not even done with February yet. If you are watching our live streams and go to our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar, you will see that on Wednesday of next week, we have a Security Plus study group coming up. So if you are interested in that, you might want to come back to the live stream on Wednesday. We'll have all new questions for you that are directly from the Security Plus exam objectives, but we've already scheduled our date for Security Plus in March as well, on March the 18th. You might be watching this video on demand months from when we did it, and you're trying to figure out, well, it's now June. How do I find out when the next event is going to be? You can always go to our calendar. It's always up to date at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, we're through our first hour of the Network Plus study group. Oh, we're not even close to being done yet. I've been asking you questions this whole time. Now it's time for you to ask me questions. And you can do that at any time by using that same URL that we were using earlier, professormesser.com/QA. You'll see a little link at the top where you can tab over to the questions that you can submit for our after show. I'll be going through all of those, or many of those, right after we are done with this. Stick around for that. Don't forget about our success bundle at professormesser.com/netsuccess. And of course, our discounted vouchers are also available on our website at professormesser.com/vouchers for those of you that are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. And of course, if you're on social media, so are we. You can find us practically everywhere, but I want to be where your favorite spots are. You can find us by typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us. professormesser.com/Discord, professormesser.com/YouTube. You get the idea. And if we're not there, let me know. I'd like to be on the same place as you are. Might be a good place to tell me about the up and coming sites where people happen to be. You know, I like to be where you are. So make sure that you let me know where the most important places are in your social media searches and your surfings on the internet. Well, this comes to the end of our first hour. We had a fantastic Q&A with you. Make sure you are familiar with these exam objectives. Make sure that you think about the topics that we went through today. Stick around for our after show coming up directly after this. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on our Network Plus study group. All right, bear with me a moment. I'm going to take a sip here. Okay, let's see how that works a little bit better. There we are. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show, back to our after show. This is a part of the study group where I am no longer going through the process of asking you questions. Now's the time that you ask me questions. And the best way to do that would be to go to the link that you see on your screen. Yes, it's important that if we have a link, that it's actually on the screen so you can see it. That's exactly where you need to go. You can submit a question at any time by going to that link. I have questions that I will be looking at on my side. Let's see, I need to set it up on my side so I can actually see those. So you'll notice, in fact, on the screen that we have online, that the message tells us, if I'm able to type things in on my view of the world. Oh, I'm now stuck in one of these. There we go. See if I can get my switching done properly here. You can submit questions for that second hour of the study group at any time. I will be moderating questions back here, so we'll be able to break through these and be able to find out what these happen to be. Make sure you have submit those questions, but they won't show up on the screen until I click them on my side. Well, that's just good internet, I think. That's the best for everybody, because sometimes we get some interesting questions coming through. I try to answer everything that you're submitting, so make sure you go through that. That may be a good place to go if you're ever working through all of those. For those of you, some of you are mentioning in the chat room that you're gathering in continuing education unit credits. Those continuing education credits are valid for both the live and the on-demand version of these study groups, but you have to have the email that lists out that you were here to be able to use them on demand. CompTIA requires you now to have that documentation of what the study group was, when it was, what you did, what it was about. And I send you all of that, the email, everything you need to be able to make that work. So make sure that you are familiar with all of those as we step through them. This would be a good place to go for the earning those CEUs. Not everybody earns CEUs for renewal anymore. And I think I have in the YouTube video description of this video the link to my video that talks about methods that you can use to renew. Some of them include CEUs, some of them don't. So if you don't like collecting continuing education unit credits, you don't have to do that. There's other ways that you can renew your Network Plus certification. And it's a different number of CEUs that you need across different categories. So unfortunately, you can't just watch 30 different videos. I think it's 30 CEUs you need for the Network Plus renewal. You can't just watch 30 of these events. They limit you as to the category of CEUs that you're able to submit in that 3-year period. So I think you can only do like 7 of these or 10 of these, and you're limited. They document everything that you need and the type of CEUs that you need on the CompTIA website under the continuing education area of their website. And they document everything there. It's a lot to read through and you have to parse through. I try to give you a summary of that in that video, but if you'd like to read for yourself, it's all on the CompTIA website. You can go through all of those to break through all of it. Let's go through some questions that have been submitted and things that I think are useful for your studies. A lot of great questions that come in, and you can ask questions about certifications. You can ask questions about information technology. You can ask questions about technology in general, or you can ask questions about anything. You want to learn more about what we do in the studio. You want to know more about anything, I guess. You can submit the question. I don't know that I'll answer any question. I'll try to do others that we have there. So make sure you keep that in mind. So other people are saying, well, if they limit the category of CEUs, well, there's different categories. I guess this would be a good place to answer this first question about CEUs. Let's go to the CompTIA website, shall we? Since this is an electronic medium, here we are on the CompTIA website. I don't know who that guy is. He's there. He's there from CompTIA. Wants to unlock your potential in tech. Let's go over to our certification side to be able to see that. You can see all the certs are here. You can parse through the certification options that are available on this side. And there are other things that we need to know about this. Under resources, there are a lot of resources available. And one of the resources that we want to know about is continuing education. There's the section we need. So it's under resources, and you have to click through to get to the continuing education section. And from there, they tell you about everything. Why do you need to renew? What is the renewal process like? We can choose a particular path because I mentioned there are different ways to renew. And if you are collecting CEUs, you could submit them also on this page as well. So the categorization of these is the important one. Let's see if we can choose multiple activities. And you can see we could either take CompTIA certifications to earn CEUs. We can take non-CompTIA certifications to earn CEUs. We can take training and higher education. We can go to industry events, such as teaching a course. We can mentor. We can be a subject matter expert. We can publish white papers, blog posts. We can publish a book. And we can have practical work experience that can provide us with CEUs. So right now, we're in the training part of this, the webinars, conferences, and college courses. Let's click through. So I mentioned that if you go to attend a live webinar, you can complete a training course, attend a live webinar, attend a conference, complete a college course, complete an American Council on Education ACE course. Never heard of those, but I'm sure they must be popular if they're actually listed here. You are currently attending a live webinar. That is the categorization of a CEU that you can earn. And for attending a live webinar, you can earn 1 CEU for each hour you attend. And it tells you that there are relevance to these. You can see what that is there, the documentation of these, and the type that you would have. And they also will list out on the screen, if I go up to the top, how many CEUs can you earn? Well, for attending a live webinar, if you are under Network Plus, you can earn 6 CEUs during the 3-year renewal process. Now, obviously, you need 30 to renew your Network Plus certification. 6 isn't going to get you there. So you might want to do other things like complete a training course, attend a conference, complete a college course, So there's lots of things you can do. There are many different options that can get you over that CEU limit, and they're all listed on the CompTIA website. You've got different options from different areas. Just find the one that works for you. I think that would be a great way to do that. So another way to work through the intricacies of the renewal process. It's not as hard as it sounds. You pick a process, you get all of the requirements to that, you submit them, and you're renewed. I think a lot of people these days are using CertMaster CE. That is the CertMaster Continuing Education training product. It is one that is all online. You take effectively an online course with an online test that is effectively open book. You go through all of it, and if you answer every single question correct, you're now renewed. Takes about a day to do, maybe even less than a day. So that would be a good place to go. Make sure you're familiar with those renewal options because that might be important if you plan on extending the availability and the usability of your Network Plus exam. Let's talk about exams themselves, shall we? I think this question from Jackie is a common one. Jackie says, I've been studying for months. What do you suggest on how to handle and combat the mass information prepared for the exam? I mentioned earlier, it is mass information. There's a lot of topics you need to know. And if you've never been in the networking world before, all of these are brand new. All of these are very new topics, new concepts, all of the tools, all of the software, the port numbers, the networking, these cables that we use, the fiber that we use, the connectors we use, the security around them. It's a lot to know. Granted, and you're absolutely right, Jackie, it's a ton of information that you need to know. I think one of your best places to go is the objectives. I think this is what you should be using to qualify how well you're doing with your studies. Here's how I use the exam objectives because they're so good. These objectives are everything you need to know. So I go to the first part of this. In fact, I'm going to go to the annotation features in my PDF reader that allows me to set colors. So I'm going to set a green color, and I'm going to come here and say, explain concepts related to the Open Systems OSI reference model. And maybe you know some of these, and maybe some of these you don't know so great. If you can explain to yourself or to someone else what these happen to be, then you can mark them as green. Let's say you're describing to someone, layer 1, it's the physical layer. It deals with getting a signal across the network from one device to another. We often refer to the cabling as the physical layer. In reality, it's the signal that's going over that cabling or over that fiber, but effectively it's the same thing because you can't have a signal unless you have the cable or the fiber, unless it's wireless, and the wireless signal is also layer 1. We could say, yep, we know that one pretty well. Let's mark that one as yes, we know it. We don't have to come back to that one. Now, maybe somebody gets in the data link layer. Oh, maybe I sort of know that one. Doesn't it sort of have to do with MAC addresses? Or does it? Or is that the one with the IP addresses or the port numbers? Maybe I need to go back to that one. I think it is MAC addresses, but we need to confirm that. So I'm going to mark that as yellow just to verify. The network layer, I don't know if I remember anything about the network layer. So I'm going to mark that one as I really need to go to that one very first off. I'll mark that one in red because I'm not as strong as I really need to be. In fact, I probably couldn't fake my way through that one. We definitely need to go revisit it. All you have to do is go through the hundreds of topics on this list and mark them with a color. That's what I would do. It's either you know it's solid, it's green. Maybe you don't know it's so solid. We sort of know it, mark it as a yellow. If we just completely check out on that particular issue, we don't know what they're talking about, mark it as red. And once you are done, you will now have a lot of red that you can go back to. You know exactly where to start your studies or continue your studies because now you have clearly identified gaps that could be presented to you on the exam. So go start with the red, study everything red. And then once you get the red things down, move them to a yellow, or now you know them as a green, now go back to the yellows. So at least you know where your priorities might be. You could maybe limp your way through a question that dealt with a yellow topic, but you know you would absolutely not be able to answer with any certainty a question that may have dealt with a red topic. So make sure you hit the red topics first. That's how I would go through it. Use these objectives. CompTIA sticks to these objectives like glue. They present this exam so specific to this set of objectives that I tell you in these live study groups very often. I've said, if you know every single one of these objectives, you will ace this exam. You will breeze through this exam. It will be nothing because you've studied exactly the topics that would be presented to you. And I think that there's a group of people that would like to go outside the scope of this, and you certainly could. CompTIA is not really going to ask you questions that go outside the scope of the exam objectives. They almost never do that, to the point that I tell you, don't worry about things outside of the scope of this. Even if they do ask one question about it, it's one question out of all of them. And if you know everything else, then you got every other question right on the exam and you've aced it. So that's what I would do, is focus on the objectives. That is a great place to go for studying exam content, for understanding where your deficiencies might be in the study process. And it can help you learn a little bit more about all of those different topics. That's why I tell you, read through this before you start your studies. And then as you are studying, you can start marking things off. Our course is in the same format as the exam objectives, so you can easily find the topics. And of course, you can cross-reference that against any other tools you might be using as well. Hopefully that will help you with your studies. A little bit of a tip. I think the exam objectives are an incredibly valuable tool that other certification entities don't give you. Cisco doesn't give you that level of content. Microsoft doesn't give you that level of content. Amazon doesn't give you that level of content. ITIL doesn't give you that level of content. So take advantage of this. They're effectively telling you everything that's going to be on the exam. That's a great benefit, and make sure you know about it. Some people come back to me after they failed the exam and say, I failed the exam. They asked me about some crazy thing related to OSI. What is that? Like, well, that's the first topic in the exam objectives. And they go, what exam objectives? I've never heard of exam objectives. And I think, oh, you missed that. You missed an opportunity there. There was some great content there that might have helped you prior to failing the exam. And once they are presented with the objectives, they go, oh, that's where all of that content is from. That's where all of those things are talking about. Yep, that's where we get that information from. If it's in that list, you should study it. If it's not in that list, don't bother. It's a great place to find out if the content you're using from a third party is accurate to the exam or not. Are they sticking to the objectives? If they're not, then you know that this content is not for this particular version of the exam. Let's do another question. Let's keep going through this list of other things. This question says, it's from Robert, talking about the expiration dates of the exams. If you pass the Network Plus, will it extend the expiration date of the A Plus as well? Thanks for everything you do for the community. Well, you're very welcome. I think you guys are doing the good stuff for the community. You're the ones studying, doing all the hard work. So if you pass the Network Plus, will it extend the A+, and this would assume that you already have the A+ certification. This is one of the things we did not talk about in the renewal process. Let's go back to the CompTIA website because we were looking at CEUs originally. That would be renewing with multiple activities. But there are ways that you can renew with a single activity. That sounds like a good way to do it. You can go to use CertMaster CE. We've already talked about what CertMaster CE is and why people would use that. We could also take a higher level CompTIA certification, and in some cases take a non-CompTIA certification. But since you were talking specifically about Network Plus or Security Plus renewing different certs, let's drill down on that. So here are the lists of earning these. So if you are looking at a certification and wondering what it renews, let's go down to, did your question ask about A+ or Network Plus? So let's go to your list. When we look at it, here we go. If you pass the Network Plus, well, let it extend the expiration date of the A+ as well. So this assumes you already have the A+ certification. You go to take the Network Plus exam. The CE designates that this is the version of the exam that is needed to be renewed after 3 years. It's the continuing education version of the exam. If you've taken this exam after 2001, was it? I think in 2011, I think it was. After 2011, everything is a CE exam, as you can see here for a lot of these. For Network Plus fully renews A+. So there's your answer, but that's all it fully renews. So Network Plus is not going to renew anything but A+, but if all you have is A+, that's a great way to do it. Notice also that Security Plus fully renews Network Plus and A+. This is one of the reasons CompTIA tells you get A+ first, then get Network Plus, then get Security Plus, because there is a renewal process that happens in there. So let's say you've took your A+ exam like 2 years and 11 months ago. Like it is about to expire, because once you earn your certification, it's only good for 3 years. If you want it to be good for more than 3 years, you need to renew it. That doesn't mean you have to take the exams again, thankfully, but you could do other things like take a higher level exam like Network Plus. So if you then took Network Plus and you passed that exam, you would be Network Plus certified for 3 years, and you have now reset your A+ certification also on the same date for also 3 years. So people will often take a higher level certification to renew a lower level certification, and CompTIA has a list of what all of those are on their site. You may notice some of these don't exactly match up to what you think they should be. For example, Linux Plus renews A+, but doesn't renew Network Plus, and it doesn't renew Security Plus. That may not be what you were expecting. So make sure you have a look at their list of all of the certs, what their certifications are, and what they renew. That will be a good way to understand what your options might be when it comes to deciding the best renewal process for you, because everybody might use a different renewal process depending on what they're doing. Let's go to more questions that you have on this list. We have a lot of these. There's a lot going on here in this. A lot of interesting questions coming in. Like this one that says, "Hey, Prof, do you still teach at Valencia?" I don't know what Valencia is. I have never taught there. So I would say the answer would probably be no, right? Do I still? Nope. You're thinking of someone else, and it's not me, because I did not teach at a Valencia. Whatever sounds orangey. It sounds Florida-ish or California-ish. It's one of those two, I would think. Just not familiar with all of those different schools that might be out there. But no, I do not still teach there. But I've never taught there to begin with. Maybe it is Spain. Did not teach in Spain either. That would be fun to do that. Most of all of the teaching we've done has been here. It's been here on the internet with you. We don't need a third party for that. We've got the internet of working through all of those. Let's keep going through the list of questions that you have. That was a good one, though, to bring that one up, to have those that are there. Let's keep going through this list. You've got a number of great questions coming in. And of course, you can submit your question at any time using the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. That QA stands for something. I've got to figure that part out. Next on our list, a lot of good questions coming in. I'm going to sift through these and try to get rid of things that we've already talked about. We do have some duplicates that have come in, so I want to be sure to work through all of this. There's a lot to work through as you go through all of these. And some of these are very particular. And one of the challenges we have with industry certifications is that being particular might not necessarily be the answer we're looking for. This is from John, who says, within the past 3 years, I switched careers to IT, and I've been struggling due to layoffs and the job market. It is a difficult job market right now, but IT is still hiring. We are still hiring people. So, as with all things in the job market, these things do tend to be cyclical. So we're starting to see a little more traction these days. So hang in there when it comes to finding a position in IT. I think we're going to see more of them popping up and being available as the year goes on. The question from John asks, what certificates would be best to help me stand out, whether it's CompTIA or otherwise? That's a question I think most of us have. We don't want to spend time getting a certification that's not going to be useful to us. This is one that I think is important to know because if you are looking for a job, what things are going to help you? And as some people I think in the industry might be confused about, and I see this written about all the time, a certification doesn't guarantee you a job. That's because nothing guarantees you a job in IT. That's not how capitalism works, I guess. That's not how any of this process works. There is a combination of things you need to bring to the table to make yourself the best possible candidate for a position. And your knowledge may or may not fit with what an employer is looking for. That's fine. It's not that everybody fits in every job that's out there, but it is useful to know what a particular employer might be looking for. And then you might be able to customize your knowledge and your certifications around the things that employers would like to see. I think that's probably a good idea regardless, right? The problem, of course, is that it's not just about the certification. It's about other things as well. In the YouTube video description of this video, I have a link in there that is how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video that I made, which talks about what I think are the 4 most important elements when you are trying to get a job in IT. The first one to be a formal education. I haven't really talked about that today, but formal education, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a technical degree, but it's useful to be some type of formal degree. The second element would be an industry certification. We certainly understand those in this live stream. Network Plus, A Plus, Security Plus, and others. The third one would be some type of practical experience. It doesn't necessarily mean formal experience or that you've had a previous job, but maybe things that you've done, that you maintain the computers at an organization that you're part of or at your church. Maybe you have done some type of internship that has to do with technology. Those are all perfectly valid practical experiences that you could have on a resume. And the fourth element, and we can talk more about it if you want, is that you already know someone who works there. That is a really important element and something you can't dismiss when you're trying to get a job with a third party, especially someone who's never met you before. It's always good to have someone who already works there who has met you before. You're not just a stranger walking in right off the street. And that is something that's incredibly important for people who are working through the details of trying to get a job in IT. So make sure you are familiar with that. Maybe these are people that you're meeting at your Microsoft user group meeting you attended. Maybe you met them at a recent regional trade show. So those types of things are important. But let's go back to this question that talked about certificates most of all and being able to work through. I think that one, if you're someone who's trying to earn or learn more about what is important in the industry, is you need to do a little research. So there's no right or wrong answer to this question, but there are more informed answers to this question than uninformed answers. And by that, I mean what you think is important to know may not necessarily be what an employer thinks is important to know. Those two things need to match up. So when you're looking at a job posting, It's important to understand everything about that job posting and to kind of read between the lines of the job posting to make that work. So I think if you're somebody who is absolutely working through job postings, understanding what employers want, you need to do the research. And in my video, I talk about making a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet, putting the job posting that's there, understanding their formal training requirements or formal degree requirements, understanding what certifications they may be asking for. Sometimes they don't ask for certifications. That's important to know as well. And they absolutely will put down, it's useful if you know these technologies. And they will list out a bunch of technologies. List those out as well. Maybe a separate line, separate columns in your database, so that you can look at all of the jobs in your area. You can see everything that you think you really would be qualified for. And you can now see across the board at all these different companies, do we see any trends? Do we see a lot of people asking for A+? Are they asking for Network Plus? Are they asking for Security Plus? Are they asking for Cisco CCNA? Are they asking for a Microsoft Azure certification? Are they asking for an AWS certification? Those are things that would be useful to know, because it leads you down a road of thinking, oh, they must be doing a lot with Amazon Web Services. They must be doing a lot with Microsoft Azure. And having some knowledge of those technologies can then help you if you walk into the door. Certainly would help you if you put that on your resume. You'll notice in that video, I do talk a lot about customizing your resume, and I have some separate videos I created on the reasons your resume might be getting rejected. And I think that's another good video, a couple of good videos for you to watch. I have one on the top 5 reasons that your resume keeps getting rejected, and 5 more reasons that your resume keeps getting rejected. And I talk about things like having a cover letter, which doesn't sound like it's very useful. If you've seen a lot of cover letters, you would be right. Most cover letters are not very useful, but they take cover letters when you send your resume in. And if you don't have a informational and well-constructed cover letter, you're missing an opportunity. So I talk about why cover letters are important and what you can do to create a very quick cover letter that focuses on what employers would like. Sometimes you can pick a technology, kind of lean into that technology, A+, Network Plus, and it matches what an employer might be looking for. But sometimes what you might think is interesting may not be what an employer thinks is interesting or important. So make sure you are looking at what employers want you to have. You may be making your decision about what your next certification is because it takes 3 months to take a certification exam, to study and pass this exam. And if it takes 3 months, that's a big investment of time. It's a big investment of money. So we want to be sure we're picking right. So have a look at the jobs in your area. This is also very geographical. If you are in the DC area, you will get a lot of jobs out there asking for Security Plus. If you are in Walla Walla, Washington, if you're in Minneapolis, if you're in LA, if you're in Dallas, if you're in Chicago, you're probably going to get a different list that are important for the employers in that area. So that's why I tell you, I can't answer the question for you about what cert should I take? What's the best option for me? I can't answer that. I have a pretty good idea of some of useful certifications, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the employers think. So make sure you do your legwork. You learn as much as you can about these. You've created your home lab, so you have some practical experience. Maybe you've done some practical experience with a third party. You've got a formal education. You know somebody who works in this place, and you have the skills and the knowledge that they happen to be looking for, and you can promote that to them. Make sure they are aware of your knowledge. That's why it's useful to take advantage of these companies that have things like a program to be able to keep track of people that could be a prospective employee with the company. So if an employee is already working at that company, there's an employee referral program that they have. If they bring in a resume of somebody they know and hand it to HR and they end up hiring that person, the current employee gets a stipend. They get a finder's fee. They get a little bonus. And so that's another great thing. If you go to a Cisco user group meeting, a Microsoft user group meeting, and you meet people, they might ask you for your resume because they can then send it to HR and kind of associate their name with you. And if you happen to get a job there, first you get a job, yay, that's a bonus, and they get cash That's an obvious bonus. That's a win-win. So another important thing to consider about. So that is a useful thing to keep in mind, especially for these jobs where you may not know what they're looking for. Your job is to know that before you even send the resume. If you're somebody who's just simply taking a one-page resume, blindly passing it to every job posting you happen to see, that is the least effective way of getting an interview. There's just no work involved with that. You need to be more strategic when it comes to getting your name in lights in front of that prospective employer. There are a number of different things you can do. Make sure you do those things. And I only talk about some of them, the top 4 in my list. Do you have a LinkedIn page? Have you put all the home lab things you're doing? Are they on your LinkedIn page? Is it available and clear that people can find it on your LinkedIn page? Those are things that are kind of outside the scope of even the things that I put into that video, but they do have an important part in the job discovery and job interview process. So make sure you work through those. That might be a good thing to consider if you are trying to find that first job in IT or get that next job in IT. Sometimes it's not exactly what you and I know. It's what the employer knows is the most important thing. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you are submitting. A lot of good stuff in here. This is a very common question I get that has to do with just scheduling your time. Boy, I know about this. This is something that is incredibly useful for anybody studying for a certification exam or just doing anything in general, because our industry tends to require us to keep up to date with the latest technologies. And new technologies are coming down the line all the time, that we now have to study brand new things that we've never seen before, that nobody's ever seen before, that are brand new. So one of the questions we see here is, what is a decent daily schedule to study properly for the certifications? And how many weeks roughly should I apply this schedule? Thank you in advance. Well, like many things, everybody has a different schedule. Everybody has different amount of time available to them in the day. And if you're somebody who's really trying to work through the details of the certification exam, this can be difficult because there's so many topics in here. For example, when we looked at the exam objectives, look at all these topics we have to know. So how long is it going to take to go through this whole thing? Well, I can tell you very broadly. Obviously, there are hundreds of topics that are in these exam objectives, but very broadly, on average, it tends to take between 2 and 3 months for people to learn everything they need to know to pass this exam. But there's no standard for everybody. Everybody comes into this exam with a different knowledge base. So maybe you've already taken the A+, and you already know a little bit of this networking. You already did some port numbers. You already did some cable type things. Or maybe you're stepping into Network Plus with no knowledge. So you're starting at a different level. It might take you longer if you've never gone through these topics before. It also is different depending on how much time during the day you have. Somebody who has a family and another second job, and they're just trying to learn everything they can, it might take 6 months to get through all of this content, which is fine. Usually takes me about 6 months to get through an exam like this because I have limited time during the day to be able to sit down and focus on studying. And it really is a focus. You got to have some quiet time to really focus. Maybe it's an hour a day is all you get. Well, if that's the case, that's an hour a day. That's a good hour a day that you could spend. And maybe that's a good amount of time for you to take everything in, kind of have it sit in your brain. You can sleep on it. And when you come back the next day, you have a different approach to the things that you learn because your brain's been thinking about it during that 24-hour period. And then you go through the next set of topics. So you might not go through much of this exam objective. Maybe you go through the first half of section 1.1 on one day and the second half of section 1.1 on another day. Or maybe you have 2 hours at a time and maybe you go through this entire set, and in one day you're able to get through section 1.1, and then you can step through and go to the next section on your list. You've got options. You got things you can do and different ways to do it depending on how you like to study. So make sure you use whatever works for you. Some people get up really, really early and they study then before the rest of the house is up. Some people wait for everybody to go to sleep and then they get their hour or two of training in. Some people have a lot of time during the day. They live alone. They can sit down and spend 6 hours a day working on this content, which seems like a lot. It is a lot. But maybe they already know some of these topics. They come very easily for them. They're familiar with the process. Maybe they already work at a help desk. They've already seen some of these technologies, so it might flow a little better for them. That's okay. Let them work through their process. You work through your process. And I think if you do that, you'll have a feel after the first week or two how much of this set of objectives you were able to get through. And then you can sort of extrapolate what an actual time frame might be to make that happen. And as I mentioned, it might take you 6 months, 9 months to get through all of this content. The important part is that you know every single one of the exam objectives. That's what you are focusing on. Don't focus on what other people tell you you think you should know. Stick to the objectives. There are a lot of people on the internet that love to tell other people what they think. Well, in this particular case, it's what you think about what you know about the exam objectives. And I think if you stick to that, the time frame is going to be whatever the time frame happens to be. You now have a process where you can measure that and have immediate feedback on how well you are learning the topics as you step through them. Those exam objectives are powerful things. Make sure you get your hands on those. They would probably be the best way to study for this exam. Let's keep going through the list. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. Let's get through others in this. Let's keep going through this list and other things that we have here. A lot of good stuff that you are sending. Thank you for sending all these questions in, by the way. Let's talk about subnetting. Oh, Drew has hit on it. Simple question, Drew. You're opening a Pandora's box of craziness here. Drew asks, hey, what are the best tips for subnetting on exam day? This is probably one of the larger questions I happen to see in our chat, in our Discord chat at professormesser.com/Discord. Our Discord chat, people are almost always hyper-focused on subnetting. So the first thing I will tell you is to always approach any topic from the exam objectives with the same weight that the exam objectives give you. So let's go to the objectives. I have them here. Let's go to the objectives there. So here's our objectives. The objectives, let's find the objective that talks about subnetting. Well, we have Section 1.1 is OSI. Section 1.2 is networking appliances. Section 1.3 is cloud concepts. We have all these port numbers in Section 1.4 along with IP types and traffic types, broadcast, like anycast, multicast. Okay, it's not in there. Section 1.5, transmission media and transceivers. Section 1.6 is topologies, collapse core, hub and spoke, 3-tier. Okay. Section 1.7 has a section on subnetting where they talk about the variable length subnet mask and the classless interdomain routing. And they also talk about other things like classes and API PA and RFC 1918 and loopback, which those obviously don't have anything to do with subnetting. Just these two bullets on subnetting, talking about VLSM Insider. That is it. That's the only talk. And let's keep going. Section 1.8 in Section 1 has evolving use cases for modern networks, including SD-WAN, VXLAN, SASE, IAC, IPv6. It's all in there as well. And then finally, we're into Section 2. So we're just looking at Section 1, Domain 1 of the exam. If we go back to the start of this exam objectives, you can see that Domain 1 is 23% of the exam. So of all of the topics that are in Section 1, all of these topics together make up a quarter of the exam, or just under a quarter of the exam. Of all of these topics, there are 8 different sections making up a quarter of the exam. And in one of those sections, in 2 bullets, we are talking about subnetting. This should give you a perspective on how much subnetting is really covered in the exam, which is not a lot. There's probably, you might get one question about subnetting once we do the math here. You know, just eyeballing it, just spitballing it here. You might get one question about subnetting. You might get 2 questions. I guess if the RNG was really bad to you, That random number generator might give you 3 questions about subnetting, but that's really outside the scope of the things that you would do here. Please, and also remember, those of you that have taken the exam, you are legally prohibited from discussing the details of your exam. So people can't necessarily tell you what is on the exam, but I would say on average, somewhere between 1 and 3 is good. I've had people come back to me though and violate the terms of their exam, their candidate agreement, and have told me, I didn't get any subnetting questions. I studied for weeks. I studied for a month on subnetting and got 1 question about it. And that's the thing I want to caution you about, is taking and hyper-focusing on any single topic from this exam. That is not a good way to study. Now, obviously, subnetting is challenging. It gives people a bit of mathematics that they have to throw into this. It's a new concept that you're working at a binary level, but you're communicating in decimal, and how do you separate these out and break them out into smaller pieces? And I get that. That is absolutely a challenge. It's absolutely a system that you do have to know when you get into networking. You will be doing a lot of subnetting. You will be verifying subnetting. You will have to very quickly determine, is this IP address on this subnet or is it on a different subnet? That's just a normal part of doing networking. But this exam is not about that. This exam is not about pushing tons and tons of subnetting on you to see how well you do with that particular topic. It mentions it once or twice in our list of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics, and it's part of 1 out of 8 different sections in one single domain that is only 23% of your exam. So the best thing I can tell you to start with from the idea of subnetting is don't get too wrapped up in this subnetting that you're spending so much time on this one topic that you forget there's a whole separate set of objectives out there you haven't touched yet. And you should probably think to yourself, if I spend a week on subnetting, what am I not spending time on? And there have been people that just, they're math challenged. Absolutely understand you people. I know you folks. I feel you. You have worked on at least getting through the details of this. You've worked on understanding the details of subnetting, breaking it down, and you could finally do subnetting. But now you've spent so much time on it that you've kind of forgotten about these other topics that could certainly come up on your exam and probably would. So I have told people, if it's just a struggle and you've already spent a week on it and you've made no progress and it's not clicking in your brain, why don't you skip that one? Just out of the hundreds of topics on this exam, just throw those 2 to the side for now. You can come back to them later if you have time, but since you've already spent a week, maybe you should go learn some other stuff right now that's going to actually be on the exam that you'll be able to answer. So you can dismiss those for the moment, or maybe for the duration of your studies. You get to make that decision, of course, but it might be a good time management for you to table those topics, perhaps permanently, and study on every other topic. Because I can tell you, if you know every other topic on the exam, you're still going to pass. So you need to make that decision. It's difficult for me to come right out and tell people, don't study a thing. That is what I'm saying, but that's not what I'm saying. Hopefully you understand the nuance here. It's about time management. And it's about, some people get subnetting, they're like, oh, I see what it's doing. I got it. It's pizza and we're cutting it up into smaller pieces and we're doing a calculation that gets us there. And that's great that they're able to do that. But for those of you that it's just too much, there's too many things happening there, it's not something I can easily grasp, just skip it. Skip that one. It's not going to hurt you. Just make sure you study everything else. That's the secret. So that's why I think that there are topics you will run into on the exam where you're just not there. Some people have problems studying numbers. So maybe port numbers is difficult. Port numbers, though, you're going to get a number of questions about port numbers on there. So make sure you are familiar with that. It's going to be a challenge, I know, to break these out and be able to memorize them. But some of these topics may be more. You can see, for example, with port numbers, let's go back to our port number list on here. Our port number, section 1.4, there's a lot more than 2 bullets here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So you've got about 20 protocols and 24 port numbers total, and you need to memorize those. Not an enormous number. That's certainly doable, and you may even know some of these already. You may already know web traffic is port 80 and encrypted web traffic is 443. You just may need to know that that's HTTP and HTTPS. So there may be ways to shortcut even that piece of it. But because there are so many of them, you'll probably get more than one question about port numbers on your exam just from statistics. Again, you might get none or you might get 5. That's the challenge, of course, with a random set of questions that are provided when you hit the start button, is you're never quite sure exactly how many of what topic will be listed there. That's just normal in the world of IT certifications. Don't get too wrapped up in the fact that they didn't ask you everything. There are people that do come back after taking their exam and said, I didn't get a question about a thing I studied. I know there's like 400 topics and there are maximum 90 questions. There's going to be a lot of things you're not going to be asked about on this exam. But it's not about what you are not asked about. It's what you are asked about. So you have to know everything so that you are able to answer the questions that they do provide to you. Make sure you are familiar with that. Let's keep going through your list. I can fit a couple more in. I know it's top of the hour, but we'll go a little bit after the market here. After the time frame, we can go into that. We got a lot of questions that have come in. We've answered a number of these. Some of these are duplicates. So it looks like I'm flipping through a number of them because I am. But we got through a number of these questions. They were just asked multiple times in this list. So let's talk about time frame. We talked about time frames. We talked about certifications earlier. Victor says, hello, thanks for everything you do. I, like others, appreciate it. I currently have a CompTIA A+ certification. It expires in 2 years. So you earned the certification a year ago. See how I did the math? It's a 3-year cert. You say there's 2 years left. There you go. If I obtain the Network Plus and Security Plus, will that renew my A+? We've already determined in a previous conversation today that it would. Will all 3 now expire 3 years from the date Security Plus was obtained? When you use a higher level certification to renew a lower level certification, it simply brings your expiration time up to where your last certification was that you took. So if you have an A+ that you took a year ago, and let's say you passed Network Plus today, now you're bringing your expiration date of your A+ up to date with exactly the same expiration date of Network Plus. Let's say another year or 2 goes by and you take the Security Plus. When you finish taking that Security Plus, if you looked at our list, Security Plus renews A+ and Network Plus, and now your A+ and Network Plus renewal is now 3 years from the time you passed your Security Plus. You've synced up that time for all of those. So when you're taking a higher level cert, it simply moves up the expiration to that day. Here's a case where this doesn't help very much. Let's say you take the A+ on Monday, the second A+ exam, and you pass it, and you're now A+ certified on Monday. Your certification is now good for 3 years. On Friday, you take the Network Plus exam. I don't know, because you're a machine. So on Friday, you take the Network Plus exam and you pass it. Well, you've now simply moved your certification for A+ up 5 days. You've now gotten 5 more days out of it. That wasn't a great renewal, was it? I mean, it helps a little bit, I guess. It gives you 5 more days. But that doesn't help you very much. But what if you passed the A+ certification 2 years and 11 months ago and you just passed your Network Plus? You've now renewed your A+ and you got 3 more years in front of you. So it's a bonus either way. Sometimes it's a better bonus than others. So it's all about those time frames. This is different than if you were to use CEUs to renew your certification. A CEU adds on another 3 years. So if you passed your A+, your second A+ exam, you become A+ certified on Monday. And then on Friday, you submit 3 years worth of CEUs. You've just extended your certification another 3 years to make it a 6-year renewal. That's how they've done this in the past. I'm assuming they still do it that way with CompTIA. So the way you renew could have a significant impact on how far you're pushing that renewal date, that expiration date down the road. So it's another thing to consider when you're deciding about which renewal method do I use to be able to do this. Another one of those that could be super important for those of you working on renewals. Some of you just want to be in the position to work on a renewal. We're getting there too. You're going to be there. We're going to make that happen. You're going to have that really work out. Other questions we have. There's a lot of questions that I get in this list about what do I need to know about different things. Now, we've already talked about some of that. And I think the exam objectives tell you everything you need to know. So for example, let's go through networking and some of the things that people ask me. Let's find a thing people ask me a lot about. So if I go into this view of networking and the things that we need to know, a lot of the things that I want to focus on, let's go to something physical, because I think that's where I get a lot of the questions from. So we get into cabling, for example. Section 1.5, compare and contrast transmission media and transceivers. And we talk about things like 802.11 standards. And people will say, where's your big list of, I need to know for 802.11a, what is the frequencies that it uses? What is the speed that you can expect to get out of it? They go through all these different processes of trying to take a very specific standard and provide a lot of technical detail about that standard. Well, none of that's listed here. So why are you trying to go through that? That's why I said you kind of have to read into the exam objectives, because on this page, they're telling you the scope of what they need from this. And in previous Network Plus certifications, you did need to know all of those different major standards, what all of those different frequencies were, what all of those different bandwidths happened to be, they went through the whole thing. But nobody's using 802.11a anymore. Nobody's using 802.11b. Nobody's using 802.11g. It's simply not around anymore. We have replaced those access points. We're all using a newer form of networking. CompTIA realizes that too and says, you know what? It's sort of pointless to learn all of those crazy statistics about every single one of these standards, especially when we don't even use most of those standards anymore. So what you need to know is that there are different 802.11 standards, and those different standards dictate what the bandwidths are, what the frequencies are, but you don't need to know the specific standards because they don't list the specific standards. Well, what if you did need to know something specific? Well, they will tell you. For example, on connector types, they don't just simply say fiber connectors. They say you need to know subscriber connector SC, local connector LC, straight tip ST, multi-fiber push-on MPO. So instead of giving you one bullet that said fiber connections, they give you 4 different bullets with very specific connectors on it, which should lead you to believe properly that they really want you to know what those look like, what those do, how those are different. They want you to get some type of compare and contrast against all of those. There's also copper connectors on here too, but they don't just say know your copper connectors. They say RJ11, RJ45, F, and B and C. So they have given you the level of detail that you need to know, and they do not deviate from this level of detail on the exam. So focus on the objectives. Focus not only on the objectives, focus on how deep they go in the objectives, because that is how deep they go in the exam. A lot of people come back to me and say, what about all the other stuff you taught us in the previous version about 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g? They dropped it. It's not in there anymore. Why are you trying to learn that? In fact, you don't need to know that because you're not going to find it anywhere, and you don't need to know it because it's not actually in the exam, and they told you that because it's in the exam objectives. So that's where you go to get a perspective of what is the information I need to know, what is the information I do not need to know, where should I be studying my efforts. That's why you shouldn't have a page of 100 port numbers that you're studying, because there's 25 port numbers you need to know. That's the difference. Go to the objectives. For some reason, found a site on the internet even said, you need to go way outside the scope of the objectives because CompTIA tells you they go outside the scope of the objectives. No, they don't. If you look at the exam objectives On the very first page, at the bottom of that page, they say, please note, the list of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists. Aha, Professor Messer, you're wrong. They're telling you it's not exhaustive. Keep reading. Although other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. See, they absolutely go outside the scope of this. That's not what they said. They said other examples pertaining to each objectives may also be included on the exam. When you go to the exam, you'll find that they don't. Although they may, the lawyers are very good at giving you the wiggle room. Thank you, lawyers. CompTIA lawyers did a great job. They gave you a set of information here that gives them an out if they want to throw something else in there, but they never do. So why are you spending your time going outside the scope when they tell you right here, they might, turns out they might not, which is in fact, exactly what they do. They do not go outside the scope. So I'm telling you, don't worry about going outside the scope of this. Don't listen to people that say you should be going outside the scope of this. Don't listen to people that say you should be learning the bandwidths, the theoretical throughputs, the frequencies used by 802.11a, because none of that is in here. And if it's not in here, it's not going to be on your exam. And this process is about getting your certification. The argument I always hear back from that is, yes, but for your job, you might run into technologies that aren't in this list. Well, let me be clear. You're absolutely going to run into technologies that are not in this list. But that's not what we're doing here. We're not training you for some other job in some other company that has some other set of technologies. We're trying to get you certified, and it is a finite set of topics that will get you that certification. So if it's a finite set of topics, why are you trying to be infinite with it? So that's why I'm going to tell you, always go back to the objectives. This is a magical document. It takes you through everything you need to know. Why are you trying to make it harder than it is? Don't make it harder than it is. In fact, that's the argument that people always come back to. The test was much easier than I was expecting. I learned 100 port numbers and all these frequencies and all. Yeah, none of that was there, was it? No, it wasn't. But boy, I know about outdated access points now. I don't know. There is something to that, I guess, but not as it relates to the Network Plus exam. So don't worry yourself with things that are not on the exam. Focus on what's there, and I think you'll be fine. Other questions? I want to fit. I know we're way past time. We can fit another one in, right? The voice is still working. It's barely working, but we're doing it. So let's do other questions. Some folks are asking about one-on-one classes. We don't do any one-on-one classes here at Messer Studios. Everything we do is live streams like this or on demand. But there's lots of good one-on-one classes. In fact, some people really thrive in a classroom environment. And if you're somebody who's looking to get your A+, your Network Plus, or Security Plus, I would recommend you go to your local community college. I am a community college graduate, so I can tell you there is value at your local community college. The community colleges tend to have more of a focus on industry certification exams and in general on information technology as a career. For some reason, I know what the reason is, but four-year universities, four-year colleges, facilities of higher learning feel that information technology is not something worthwhile of a four-year degree, and they don't tend to teach it. People complain about that, but in reality, this is a huge advantage for you. If they're not teaching it in college, that means that this is going to be very valuable information for the people that need it. And indeed it is, and that's why information technology and the people that work in IT do extremely well in their career, not just in the types of benefits they get in the places that they work, but they also get very good salaries. So that's why I tell people all the time, this is totally worth investing in. There is no top line. There's no ceiling that you could hit in information technology. The sky's the limit. So it's really up to you on how you apply it and how you move up in the jobs that you get in the places that you work. But there's complete flexibility and tons of options available in the market once you start getting into that information technology ecosystem. So the idea of getting a class, and I tell you to go to a community college, is that they're teaching these classes. They might even have an A+ class, a network plus class, a security plus class, and these are usually over an extended time frame. I highly recommend avoiding anything that says it's a 1 week or 2 week boot camp. These are popular marketing terms that are used for these, but the reality is, as you've already seen, it is impossible for an individual to capture everything they need to know about these exams in a week or even 2. You're not even close at that point. So that means that you should not be jumping into a boot camp, a 1 week boot camp that usually costs thousands of dollars. You jump into that 1 week boot camp, you're only going to be able to capture a fraction of what's in those exam objectives, at least a reasonable capture of that information. You've reasonably learned that information enough to take the exam. So that's worthless, I think, to somebody just starting out. Okay, well, what if you go to the boot camp after you've gone through the exam objectives? Well, why do you need the boot camp then? You've already gone through the objectives. You've already done it. I don't think boot camps really work for industry certification exams. They might work to learn specific topics. I used to go to 1 week trainings for a new version of firewall software. That's a good 1 week of learning those particular topics, but I'm not ready for a certification exam at that point. So but your community colleges will often have 6 weeks of this, 9 weeks of these types, or even longer, to have training that takes you through every topic of the Network Plus exam. It's in a classroom setting with other people that are learning the same thing. There's an instructor, there's conversation back and forth, there's things you can work on. You can set up networking equipment and kind of go into a broader scope with these exam objectives to really bring them home. So use that networking of people for the people that really need that. If you don't like the online, you don't like to passively watch videos, it's difficult to read a book, classroom environment might be exactly what you're looking for. And you will also meet other people that are going to be in the same industry as you. They're going to probably might even already have jobs at some of these companies. It's a great opportunity to network. So anytime that you can get with a bunch of other technical people and talk about technical things, you need to be there. Whether it's a Microsoft user group meeting, a training class, a trade show that's in your area, whatever it is, that's where you need to be. And I think that would be an important place to go, especially if you're trying to get that certification and really use that knowledge to get a job in the industry. It's more than just getting the paper. You really do have to know the content. And although knowing a good bunch of it is going to get you the cert, the certification is just the beginning. As we often say, getting to that max level, that's just the beginning. Now you have everything after that point. And that's where the real interesting work begins. That's where your real knowledge transfer begins. Once you get past that point, it's all in the game that happens after you get the certification. So get to that point where you've got that bare minimum of knowledge, which is the cert. You've now got a broad understanding of these different certifications. You understand the topics from these certifications. You now understand the terms that are used when you go to these meetings. Now you can start building on it and building up that foundation. And the better you build that foundation, the more diverse you build that foundation, the more marketable you are going to be in the future. And that's really what we're trying to get you to, a point where you're now learning, you're adding to that knowledge, and you're leveling up in the IT industry, which is one of the best ways to move into the different jobs, the high-paying jobs, the more interesting positions, the emerging technologies, the things that are brand new on the market. You have to build yourself up to be ready when that happens. These just don't fly in and land in your lap and go, okay, now you have a job in cloud. You have to work up to that. And you have to start somewhere. And this is a great starting point that gives you a broad understanding of these technologies that you will be able to build on and use for the rest of your career. That's the beauty of Network Plus. Well, I think that brings us to the end of another study group. That's a good place to start. Thank you so much for being here in our first hour. We always have such a good time going through the Q&A. We, of course, will have all brand new Q&A next month. So come back for the next study group. You can put it on your calendar now. You can find out when the next calendar is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. I'll be over on Discord after this, along with a lot of you and a lot of other people that are already there. Those thousands of people are on our Discord server learning about Network Plus every day. You can find that at professormesser.com/discord. Thank you so much for joining us. We love to have you here. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you next Wednesday for our Security Plus study group. Talk to you then. See you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.